Hello, and welcome to HHH, the podcast where we talk about those horrible humans in history. I am your host, Angela Pearson, and welcome to all of you new listeners who are joining us today. Thank you so much for tuning in, and for all of you who continue to listen, thank you so much. If you're liking what you're hearing, if you're liking these creepy stories, or these tales about these horrible humans, please be sure you are liking and subscribing to this channel. And please make sure you're turning on notifications, because I mentioned in my last week's episode that I am going to be taking a small break. I know, it's so sad, for the month of December. It's just such a crazy time of year. And I don't know about you, but you might not have enough time to listen, because I won't have enough time to do the adequate research that you deserve. So just be sure that you're turning on that notification. So in January, when I start doing episodes again, you will be able to get notifications that I am posting again. But also a surprise, I am going to actually be doing one more episode after this episode, because this is episode 39. I can't end it on episode 39. That would be lame. So don't worry, there will be one more episode after this, so I can have 40 total episodes. Also joining me in today's recording session is my dog Maximus. So if you hear any sniffs or whines, that is definitely my dog. Anyways, so today we are going to be talking about one of the most notorious and iconic outlaws in American history, Billy the Kid. He was a ruthless killer, or was he a misunderstood folk hero? Ooh, intriguing. We will explore his life, his crimes, and ultimately his death. So sit back and enjoy this episode as we uncover the truth behind Billy the Kid. Let's get into this. Billy the Kid, we all have heard his name. You know, he's an infamous gun-slinging Wild Wild West kind of guy, and it's rumored that he killed up to 21 men. But there's a lot of rumors and myth that surround this guy's life. So let's try and get into the true facts about Billy the Kid, and you guys tell me what you think about him. Was he actually this ruthless, terrible criminal? Or was he just a misunderstood man? So let's get into this. Billy the Kid was actually born Henry McCarty, also known as William H. Bonney. So here we go. Here's another one of our horrible humans in history that loves changing his name. I mean, he was an outlaw, so I could see why he had a lot of aliases, but he was born Henry McCarty and eventually got the nickname Billy the Kid because he just was really short in stature and just reminded everybody of a kid, even though he kind of was. He was super young. Anyways, we'll get into that. But he was born on November 23rd, 1859 in New York City. At least they believe so. It's not really clear for sure that that's where he's born, but that's where they believed he was born. And they don't know his exact date of birth either. So like I said, there's a lot of mystery and confusion about Billy the Kid's true story and true origins and everything that happened in his life. So a lot of people believe he could have been born earlier, and some believe he actually was born later, but we don't really know. His mother, her name was Catherine McCarty, was actually Irish. She was an Irish immigrant who came over to the United States to escape the potato famine that was happening over in Ireland and was looking for a better life for herself. His father, so Billy the Kid's father, is largely unknown. We don't actually know who he is. There are many rumors, just like with everything else with Billy the Kid's life. There was a lot of rumors, but no one actually knows who the father was. He abandoned them. So his mother was left to raise him largely on her own. At the age of 15, him and his mother moved to Indiana, where Billy would start growing up and becoming more of a man. Billy's mother remarried a man named William Antrim, and he would adopt Billy as his son, but the relationship between Billy and his stepfather was really fraught with instability. Like, he didn't have a really close relationship with this man and didn't really feel like it was his father, which is fair. His mother would die from tuberculosis in 1874 when Billy was just 14 years old. After her death, Billy's life was thrown into chaos, and he was forced to live with his stepfather, who was very neglectful and eventually just completely abandoned Billy and his brother. Now, Billy really struggled with feelings of abandonment once his mother and stepfather were gone, which I don't blame him. Like, his mother, the one adult that was consistent in his life, was gone suddenly. And then his stepfather, who was supposed to care for him, just kind of pieced out, up and left. So it's not surprising that he would feel abandoned, but this instability eventually pushed him towards a life of crime, where he sought to carve out his own path. Like, he had no option. He had to find a way to provide for himself, and unfortunately, that led him down a path of crime. So he was quickly entangled in a life of criminal activities. Billy's teenage years were a mix of petty thefts and brushes with the law. By the time he was 14, he had already started to run with really rough crowds, and his first documented criminal act was a set of petty thefts, including stealing clothing. Which, if you think about it, he was abandoned, couldn't provide for himself. Stealing clothing kind of makes sense if you're desperate. That's what you're going to steal. He wasn't trying to rob banks or anything. He was just trying to provide for himself. Not that I'm justifying his criminal activity in any way, shape, or form. I'm just kind of explaining why it makes sense that that's the kind of crimes he committed. Because he was never a bank robber. A lot of people confuse that. Billy the Kid was never a bank robber. So, despite his short stature, like I mentioned, Billy the Kid was a pretty short individual. He was very quick-tempered and had a natural knack of surviving in difficult situations. So, he was a survivor. Nothing could really keep him down. He was also known to be super charismatic, and he was really popular with people. People really liked him, and he seemed to be very kind and very gentlemanly. So he got along well with a lot of people, and a lot of people would claim that he was a very attractive man. All the ladies really liked him. I mean, he must have had a stellar personality, because I have seen the one truly authenticated picture of Billy the Kid. And I'm not going to lie, man, he looks like a freaking goober, like goober town. I will post a picture of him on my Instagram channel, but if you, oh, the poor kid, he's just a goober, but he had to have an incredible personality because everyone really liked him. The ladies really liked him. So, despite the fact that he looked like a goober, and maybe it was just a bad picture. I don't know. You'll just have to look at it. But he was more known to people, even though he did commit crimes. People kind of looked up to him and saw him more of a hero, kind of like a Robin Hood type of figure than a hardened criminal. So at this point in time, he was more admired than feared. And I don't know if that would change later. It probably did a little bit, but I think people more saw him as the hero type, at least at this point in time. So eventually, in his teen years, he moved to Santa Fe, New Mexico, where he would continue to get into trouble, even earning the reputation as a thief and a hot-headed youth. And one thing that I found interesting about his move to Santa Fe, now, I want you to picture Santa Fe very differently than how you might picture it right now. Right now, you'd probably picture a city or whatever. Back then, it genuinely was the wild, wild west. And more people spoke Spanish or a Native American language than they spoke English. And when Billy the Kid moved out to Santa Fe, he really immersed himself in the Hispanic culture. He learned how to speak Spanish and could speak fluently and was often mistaken to be a Mexican himself because he just fully immersed himself in that full culture and just absolutely loved it. So the people in that area really, really liked him because he cared to get to know their culture. He wanted to be part of them. And so people in that area really liked him, even though he did have a reputation of being a thief and a hothead. He really tried to get along with the locals, which at the time were Hispanic people and the Native Americans. And most of them lived in like tents and like you picture those old Wild Wild West towns. Yeah, that's not a joke. It was pretty sketchy back then. So in 1875, when Billy was just about 16 years old, he was actually arrested for stealing a coat and a vest from a laundryman in Santa Fe, New Mexico. He was placed in jail, but actually managed to escape. And he escaped, I believe it was this instance where he actually climbed out the chimney to escape. And this, I will tell you, he was an escape artist. Anytime he got arrested, it seemed that he would escape from jail. And this was the very first time that they learned Billy the Kid was not to be underestimated because he would escape your capture. And when you think of jails, don't think of like cells with bars and those kinds of things. It was literally like rooms that they put people in. It wasn't as intense as you think. So it wasn't that hard to escape. I think for this instance, they left the room for a second and he jumped up the chimney and just skedaddled away and ran away. So this was the beginning of his criminal background, I guess you could say. But his reputation as a quick and elusive outlaw was starting to take shape at this point in time. So Billy's first confirmed kill actually occurred in 1877 when he was about 18 years old. So the victim, and I'm putting victim in rough air quotes because I'm not going to lie, this guy had it coming. Not that there's any justifiable reason to ever kill anyone, but this man, by the way, his name is Frank, quote, Windy Cahill. His nickname was Windy because he passed gas a lot. I mean, I don't really know that. I'm just assuming that because why else would you call this man Windy? Unless he talked a lot and I don't know. But I'm going to go with he probably farted a lot. So anyways, this man's name was Frank Windy Cahill. He was actually a local blacksmith in the town who was known to taunt Billy. Like he would come in to the saloon or just see Billy and harass him and not just like point fingers and laugh and like tease him or whatever. He would like full on beat Billy up. So Billy had enough. So one night, Mr. Windy actually attacked Billy in a fit of rage at the local saloon. So Billy was just minding his business, playing a card game or something, and I'm sure there were words that were exchanged between the two of them. And so Mr. Windy tackled Billy and just was pounding him. And while Billy was laying on the ground getting like just beaten up by this man. Billy was fumbling around at his belt, trying to pull out his gun, and once he finally reached it, he grabbed it, pulled it, and shot. And it shot Mr. Windy in the abdomen. And Mr. Windy just kind of slumped over, and Billy had to slide out from underneath him and fled on horseback into the night because he knew, like, I just killed someone. I am going to be a wanted man. So some sources suggest that this was an act of self-defense, while others believe that it was actually a result of Billy's anger towards Cahill. Like, they think that Billy acted first, but a lot of the accounts actually make it seem like this was more an act of self-defense. He was trying to, get this bully to leave him alone. Regardless of the reason, though, this specific event marked a turning point in Billy's life, as it cemented his reputation as a killer. This was the first time he had killed anyone. He had a reputation as a thief, as an outlaw, but now he actually killed someone. So from this moment on, he would be seen as a dangerous figure who could no longer escape the consequences of his actions. He needed to be brought down because now he was dangerous. Now, after this incident, Billy was desperate to turn his life around because, like I said, he was kind of forced into this life of breaking the laws and doing things that would get him in trouble because he was forced to take care of himself. He didn't actually want to live that kind of life and really wanted to turn his life around, especially after killing someone. He was like, I don't want any part of this anymore. And so it was about this time that he met a man named John Tunstall. Now, this is really important that he met John Tunstall. So John Tunstall became, let me explain. John Tunstall was a wealthy English rancher and businessman. He actually settled in Lincoln County in 1876, and he'd opened a general store in the town, and began shipping cattle. He actually established himself as a really predominant figure in the area. And when he met Billy, he decided he would give Billy a chance to turn his life around. So Billy accepted a job as a ranch hand to help John Tunstall with the cattle. Now, John and Billy became very, very close, and Billy didn't only see him as a really close friend, but as a mentor, especially because he was the first person who was willing to give Billy a chance to turn his life around. Well, John Tunstall's business interests actually came into direct conflict with a powerful local faction that had been dominating in the area. And you could almost call it like a gang that existed. That's not really what it was called at that point, but it basically was. And it was led by a man named James Dolan, who was an Irish businessman who also had come over fleeing the potato famine, but he was ruthless. This man was not to be messed with. And he also was a cattle baron, and he was already pretty entrenched in the region and did not like that John Tunstall was bringing competition to the area because James Dolan had dominated the area for so long. He did not like that there was competition. Not to mention that James Dolan actually was paying off the sheriff and his deputies. So no matter what happened, the sheriff and the deputies were always going to be on James Dolan's side, and James Dolan could do basically whatever he wanted. Now, John Tunstall was very outspoken and a critic of the corrupt influence the Dolan's factions actually had in the area. And so the two groups really started to grow tension between the two of them, and eventually it reached a pretty severe boiling point, to the point where, it became known as the Lincoln County War. And this war a specific event within this war would solidify Billy's future as a criminal. Like I said, he's trying to escape that kind of life, but what happens next just solidifies the fact that he will forever be an outlaw. So, my notes got all messed up. So, the flashpoint of the Lincoln County War occurred on February 18th, 1878, when John Tunstall was murdered. So Tunstall had, like I said, been an outspoken critic of Dolan's faction, and Dolan had sent men out to ambush Tunstall while Billy and a few other men were out with him, managing their cattle. So Billy was actually there when Tunstall had been ambushed and killed. Now remember, this is his really good friend. This is his mentor. So he's witnessing the murder of his best friend, the one person who truly believed in him. This was devastating to Billy. And so he vowed that he would get a few of them before he would die. So, in January 10th, 1980, Billy would actually shoot and kill a man named Joe Grant. Now, the story goes that, this is a different story. This is somewhat related, but not fully. It goes that Billy and the man actually started having a conversation, and Billy noticed the man's gun and asked Joe if he could look at his gun. And while he was looking at the man's gun, he flipped the cartridges around so the hammer would actually land on an empty cartridge where there was no bullet, and then handed the gun back to the man. Right after the man got his gun back, he pointed it directly at Billy and tried shooting it, but of course there was no bullet in the barrel, so Billy grabbed his own gun and shot the man dead in the face. So, but the important part that my notes got all really messed up. So during the Lincoln County War, so that happened during the war. But another thing that happened was really important is for revenge, Billy actually joined a group of men called the Regulators, and these Regulators were basically all the friends of John Tunstall that wanted to seek revenge. And they actually got deputized so they could help enforce the law. And a lot of people in the region actually were super excited about this because they were sick of Dolan and his men having such a monopoly over everything in the town. So they were kind of excited about this. But basically, the Regulators turned into a revenge force instead of what's the word? They weren't not a legal force, like a police force. They weren't a police force. They were just like, okay, time to get revenge. So, anyways, so Tunstall's murder, like I said, was a turning point in the conflict, and it sparked a series of retaliatory acts, I'm saying that wrong, that led to full-scale violence between the two rival factions and literally would slingshot Billy back into his life of crime. Because like I said, he joined the Regulators, that their goal was not only to avenge Tunstall's murder, but also to take down Dolan's political and business influences in the area. So Billy, who had already earned a reputation as a quick-drawing gunslinger, joined the Regulators pretty quickly and became one of their most feared members. It's at this point that the Regulators launch a full-scale attack on Dolan's stronghold in Lincoln, New Mexico, where they barricaded themselves in the Tunstall store, and the battle was super intense, and the Regulators managed to kill several of Dolan's men, including Buckshot Roberts. a notorious gunman. So if you've never heard that name, it was pretty famous for his talent in shooting, but the regulators were able to kill him. Now, more importantly, on April 1st, 1878, Sheriff William Brady. Now, this is the sheriff. This is the sheriff, who's been paid off by Dolan. So on April 1st, Sheriff William Brady was killed by the regulators. He was basically just walking down the street, and it's believed that Billy the Kid was the one who walked up and pulled the trigger and killed him, because that's who they really wanted to get rid of, was Sheriff William Brady. Now, this act, the death of William Brady, intensified the conflict, and now law enforcement began to get involved, which is so crazy. You've basically got this war going on, and law enforcement's like, yeah, whatever. Our sheriff's involved, so he's got it. But now that the sheriff was dead, law enforcement really started to crack down on the regulators, and the increased fervor. Sorry, I can't read. And they were really trying to track them all down, and they really, at this point, solidified that Billy Kid was an outlaw, a dangerous outlaw, and he was well known throughout the region by now. And soon, all the regulators just would scatter so they wouldn't get arrested. And it turns out a little while later that they were trying to issue warrants for all of the regulators, but were kind of struggling with doing so. So what they actually did is they sent out a warrant for Billy the Kid's arrest. And ironically, the new governor actually issued amnesty for anyone who had participated in the Lincoln County Wars. Everyone, that is, except for Billy the Kid. He was the only one who did not receive amnesty, but still had a warrant out for his arrest and immediate capture. So, after the death of the sheriff in Lincoln County, there was an election held because they needed to replace the sheriff, right? And they needed some lawman to be in there to keep the laws around the town, even though, it was a little bit Wild Westy where people basically did whatever. But for the election, a new sheriff was elected, and his name was Pat Garrett. And this would actually drastically impact Billy the Kid's life in a very dramatic way. So Pat Garrett, I feel like, and Pat and Billy the Kid, I think, are very intertwined. Their stories are very, very connected. In fact, it's rumored that Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid had actually been friends at one point, because they both had actually worked on Tunstall's ranch. And so it's rumored that they were actually pretty tight friends. And I'll explain why this rumor is important later. But for now, it seems that Pat and Billy were no longer friends, because on December 13th, 1880, Sheriff Pat Garrett issued a warrant for Billy the Kid's arrest with a $500 reward. And I know what you're thinking, $500 isn't very much, but let me put that into perspective. $500 in 1880 would be equivalent to $15,473 in today's money. So if a warrant was out for Billy the Kid today, you would get $15,000 for any information about him or his capture. So it only actually took Pat Garrett 10 days to capture Billy the Kid when they raided Stinking Springs. Now, there is a story, I actually really liked this story, about how Pat Garrett actually captured Billy the Kid. So it's rumored that like I said, most of this is rumor. There's no solid evidence for anything. But I was watching a documentary where they told this story, and I'll tell you my favorite quote from this story, but from the historian that was telling the story. So what happened, supposedly, is they had been chasing Billy the Kid, and he locked himself in a barn. And they were just waiting for Billy the Kid to come out. They didn't want to risk going in there because it would be dangerous. No one wanted to get shot because they knew he had a reputation for shooting people. So what Pat Garrett did is he set up shop outside of the barn. And granted, these guys were in there a couple days. So Billy the Kid's been in this barn for a couple days. And Pat Garrett lights fire, puts a grill on top of the fire, starts cooking some bacon, starts wafting the smell into the barn. Now, just imagine you've gone a few days without any food, and you start smelling bacon. And in the story, it said that Pat started saying, "Don't you want some? Doesn't it smell good? Come on, you know you want some of this bacon. Come get bacon." And eventually Billy just caves and can't take it anymore and just is like, "Give me some bacon." And this is my favorite quote from that historian. He said, "And thus we see the power of bacon," which I think is accurate. I mean, I don't know about you, but I love bacon. And if I'd been starving for days, that would have worked on me. I'm not going to lie. So anyways, Pat Garrett captures Billy the Kid, which is huge. It's a big national story. And he's actually going to get the reward money because he was the one who took Billy the Kid in. So, which I want you to keep in mind for rumors and theories that people have. He gets the reward money, okay? So, once in jail, once he's been booked into jail, Billy actually writes some letters, multiple letters, to the governor asking for a pardon, like all of his other buddies got. Like, "Please, come on. Like, I'm the only one who didn't get pardoned. Can you please just pardon me?" Well, the governor just ignores his letters, basically. He doesn't respond, doesn't want to get involved. So, because this is a high-profile case at this point, Billy's pretty famous. He is a pretty famous fugitive. So, in April of 1881, Billy was placed on trial and found guilty of Sheriff Brady's murder. And on April 13th, he was sentenced to be hanged. Now, the judge said that he was to be hung until he was, quote, "dead, dead, dead," which Billy responded by saying, quote, "You can go to hell, hell, hell." And I think that was a great response by Billy. So, anyways, once he was convicted and sentenced, he was moved to Lincoln County, their courthouse. They didn't really have a jail. Remember, when you're picturing them going to jail, it's not like you're imagining. It's literally a room in their courthouse. Okay. So he's moved to the top floor of the town courthouse in Lincoln County. Now, on April 28th, Garrett left to go get the wood ready for Billy's hanging, which some people see as kind of suspicious. Picture this. You are the sheriff who caught the biggest known vigilante out there. And you're going to peace out and let other people watch them while you pick up wood for the gallows? Like, that doesn't make sense. I feel like he would have sent his deputies, but I don't really know. This is where it goes back to, were they actually friends? Was there maybe a conspiracy? Because let me finish telling you the story, and we'll get back to these conspiracies that I have in my mind. So, Garrett leaves to go get the wood for the hanging. And this leaves Billy with two guards. So it was the deputies. One of the men's names was James Bell, and the other man was Bob Oliger. And they were the only ones there to guard Billy. Well, Bob would actually take 5 other inmates across the street to a restaurant/saloon to get some dinner and leave James and Billy alone. Now, once James and Billy were alone, Billy asks James if he could use the outhouse. Now, there's some speculation, again, that there was a gun hidden in this outhouse, and some people think that it was actually Sheriff Garrett that hid the gun for Billy. There's no proof, but I'll explain why this theory makes the most sense compared to the story that we have, which was actually told by the only true record we have of this is Pat Garrett's book that he wrote about Billy the Kid. So, of course, he's going to paint himself as some hero. So, we don't know all the true facts. Anyways, back to the story. So, he goes to the outhouse. They're coming back. And now, at this point, this is where it gets a little murky because some people say that while James wasn't looking, Billy snuck into the treasury and stole a gun. But the problem with that is Billy's arms and legs were shackled with heavy chains. Remember, they used to shackle people with really big chains that just kind of clunked around. You know, you picture ghosts' chains, the sound of that. That's what it would have sounded like. So there wouldn't have been a good way for him to sneak anywhere while wearing those chains. But they believe that at some point he kind of snuck into the armory. And then as they were walking up the stairs, Billy turned around and tried to attack James Bell to try and get him out of the way so he could escape. And it said James pulled his gun. Billy grabbed the gun and turned it around and shot James where he died. And some people say James died at the bottom of the stairs. Some people say he died at the top of the stairs. In one of the documentaries that I watched, they actually used luminol to test for blood. And crazily enough, even though this is like 100 plus years old of a case, they were actually able to find a ton of blood at the top of the stairs. So they're actually assuming that's where James really died instead of at the bottom of the stairs. This is important because in the book that Pat Garrett wrote, said that he had died at the bottom of the stairs with his back turned to Billy. But it's more likely that him and Billy were fighting over James's gun. He got shot at the top of the stairs where he died. So it's just little interesting facts that seem a little off in Garrett's story that don't match the evidence, which they were able to find out, which is so crazy. The luminol would still work on the blood stain there. It's just mind-blowing. Anyways, after he killed James Bell, he quickly grabbed a shotgun and ran over to the window because he knew that Bob over in the restaurant/saloon probably heard the gunshots. So he ran over to the window and waited for Bob to come running back to the building. Well, while he was coming back, Billy yelled down to him as he was running up to the building. He yelled down to Bob saying, "Look up, old boy, and see what you get," and then shot him dead. Now, I want to mention that Billy later said that he felt really bad about having to kill James because he really, really liked him. He was a really good man, and he really didn't want to kill him. On the other hand, he really hated Bob, so he didn't feel bad at all killing Bob because he had been a cruel man, so he had no remorse for him. So he was actually kind of excited to be able to shoot him dead. So he ended up escaping the courthouse and getting away. So as Billy's notoriety grew, so did his criminal activities. Like I said, he was a gunslinger and an escape artist. This is like the third time that he had escaped from prison, quote unquote prison. It's not the prisons you're thinking about today. So it was a lot easier to escape. And he evaded capture time after time after time. And his list of crimes included cattle rustling, robbing stores, and killing lawmen. And by this time, he was in his early 20s, so his criminal record was pretty long, and his reputation as a killer spread pretty quickly across the region. And one of the most enduring legends about Billy the Kid is that that there's a claim that he killed 21 men, one for every year of his life. Now, some reports suggest that Billy killed at least 8 men. The story of him having killed 21 is widely seen as a myth and probably exaggerated, which after learning about his story, I think it's totally a myth that he killed 21 men. 8 is way more believable and seems to add up when you hear the whole story. But during his last days, so he escapes from the jail and his reputation's widespread. Everybody knows about him. So his last days were marked by his fugitive status. So after escaping from jail in New Mexico, he was being held for the murder of Sheriff Brady, and he went on the run because he did not want to get captured again. And he kept evading capture through, the authorities were consistently hunting for him. But finally, after many months of searching, so it only took a few more months, Sheriff Pat Garrett tracked Billy to a ranch in Fort Sumner in New Mexico in July of 1881. So, in a dramatic confrontation, supposedly, there's many stories about this evening. Billy the Kid was shot and killed by Pat Garrett on July 14th, 1881, at the age of 21. Now, Garrett had been tipped off that Billy had been staying at this ranch, working at this ranch by the ranch owner who had introduced Billy to his sister, and his sister and him had hit it off. And it's rumored that the ranch owner didn't like that Billy was, hitting it off with his sister, and that's why he turned him in. But it's also believed that the ranch owner was good friends with Billy, so it's hard to really say what happened. So what had happened, the other story about this night was that Garrett had come to speak with the ranch owner in the middle of the night to say, what the heck, where is he? You said that he was staying here, where is he? But while he was there in the middle of the night talking to the ranch owner, by the way, in the dark, they don't have lights on because it's what did they say, 2 in the morning or something? Pretty late. They don't have lights on. They're talking in the dark. And while they're talking in the dark, a figure appears in the doorway of the room. And the figure in Spanish says to the ranch owner, what's going on? Are you okay? And remember, Billy the Kid speaks Spanish. And Garrett immediately pulls out his gun and shoots the man because the ranchman's that's him. And Garrett believes that he recognizes Billy the Kid's voice. So he immediately shoots the figure in the doorway. Now, some say that Billy made a move for his gun first and was shot in self-defense. Well, most people actually believe Garrett executed him without warning. Billy didn't see him sitting there in the dark and just shot him. Now, Billy's death really remains shrouded in mystery, as many of the details are very, very vague and are only told from Pat Garrett's stance, because there are people that believe that Garrett actually killed the wrong person and Billy the Kid wasn't killed and actually got away and lived longer. And if you think about it, if Garrett is well known for killing the infamous Billy the Kid, which there wasn't any other witnesses to the body, no one else saw who it was. It's believed it could have been a Hispanic ranch hand that had come in to check on the ranch owner, but no one actually knows for sure if it was Billy that got shot. And there is a man who actually claimed to be Billy the Kid. His name was Brushy Bill Roberts. He claimed to be Billy the Kid and even sought pardons for his crime as Billy the Kid. And at some point, the governor agreed to sit down and talk to him and actually brought in all of Billy the Kid's enemies to basically taunt him. Be like, yeah, there's no way you're getting a pardon. By the way, here's all your enemies if you really are Billy the Kid. And he ended up dying December 31st, 1950 of a heart attack. And they think it probably was because of the stress of meeting with all of these enemies. But in the documentary that I was watching from the History Channel, the FBI actually took that one authenticated photo of Billy the Kid and did a facial comparison using, the facial recognition software of Brushy Bill Roberts to see if they were a match, and they are a 100% match. So, I mean, I don't know how inaccurate that was, but I feel like facial recognition software is pretty good. And if you do look at the photos, you can kind of see the similarities. And Brushy Bill Roberts knew things about Billy the Kid's life that a lot of people didn't know. So I don't know. Did Billy the Kid die? Did he not die? Did he survive? That's up for debate. No one really truly knows. They've asked to do DNA to compare because Billy the Kid's body is supposedly buried somewhere, but there had been flooding, so who knows if there's actually DNA evidence there anymore or whatever. They have tried and keep running into legal barriers to try and get this tested. So we don't really know if Billy the Kid truly died or not. Myself, I personally believe that he survived. I think that the wrong person was shot by Garrett, and he tried to cover it up by writing this book to show that, oh yeah, I was just scared and thought he was going to kill me, so I just shot, and then, yeah, he's for sure dead, and like, I know everything about this story, so don't even question me, like, kind of thing. That's kind of what I feel like. They, in the documentary, interviewed both Garrett's posterity and Billy the Kid's posterity, which he has a great grandson, which is crazy because apparently he had kids. Didn't know that. So, and each of them believe, like, one's like, yeah, I think he lived. Billy's relatives are like, yeah, I think he survived. But Garrett's family's like, yeah, no, he died. So there's no consensus anywhere. So anyways, Billy the Kid's death didn't mark the end of his story, though. If he did die, it's not the end of his story. If anything, it began to transform his story into legend. He became a symbol of rebellion, and his story has been told and retold in books and movies and songs. And his life became very romanticized as an outlaw who fought against corrupt forces and giving him a place in American folklore. So over time, the truth about Billy Kid's life became blurred in myth. Like I said, we don't really know what's happened in his life, but his story is fascinating. The number of people he killed, the reasons for his violence, and his character have all been interpreted in many, many different ways. Like, was he a cold-blooded killer? Or was he just simply a product of the harsh environment that he grew up in? That's a question. What do you guys think? Comment below. I really want to know. Like, what do you guys think? Was he a cold-blooded killer, or was he just doing what he had to do to survive? Did he deserve the reputation of, like, Robin Hood, or was he just an opportunistic criminal? It's hard to say because all of the facts are just so blurry in his case. But all we know for certain is that his story has captured the imagination for generations, and his name is forever going to be tied to the Wild Wild West. So, with all the men he killed, we can say that he was a horrible human in history, but was he? I want to know what you think. Tell me in the comments below. So, now I know, like I mentioned in the beginning of the episode, I said I wouldn't be doing any episodes in December, but seriously, I couldn't end on episode 39. That's just lame. So I am going to be doing one more episode before I take my break, and I will be doing another listener recommendation that came from Sam. Sam, thank you so much. I appreciate your patience because she requested this a while ago. But I'm excited because next week we are going to be talking about the lady serial killer, Aileen Wuornos. Guys, her story is insane. So make sure you tune in to hear her chilling tale next week. Remember, one more episode before my break until January. So Tune in next week so you can hear all the creepy details about her chilling story. We will see you guys next week.